the indigenous shamanic cultures would say there's a whole range of, non-physical, interdimensional spirits, or however you want to phrase that, demons, spirits, angelic beings, guardians, malevolent beings, ambiguous beings, beings who don't give a fuck about us, beings who, want to see us evolve, and so on. And the problem is, particularly coming from a modern Western kind of conditioning, we just don't have much grounding or much foundation or much legacy.
Thank you for joining me, Daniel, this morning. Your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cheers. So I read your book a few years back and it's still stuck with me. It's one of the best books I've ever read, Breaking Open the Head. I recommend it to everyone. I know you've been on quite a journey since, and I'd love to talk today about the beginnings of your journey and obviously everything that's transpired since, because that was quite a time ago. And now you're quite active in the political sphere and you're talking about AI and politics in the West. And I'd just love to discuss all these things with you this morning.
I'm at your disposal. Ask me whatever you want.
Sure. I guess I've got a couple of questions that I've wanted to ask you for a while, but we'll get to them because we need to explain to people like who you are. I'm curious because, like I said, read Breaking Open the Head, but I'm curious why on this journey, why was the journey choice of yours to travel around the world, taking different psychedelic drugs and different ceremonies? That's not the first thing people usually expect. I know you've heard of maybe like gap years in the UK where students will take maybe a year out and go discover themselves, go to Bali or India or something. But why was this your choice as opposed to anything else?
Yeah, well, actually, now many people are doing it, but this was, that book came out in 2002.
Mm,
So I wrote it in the late 90s or up until 2001 or something. And back then, people were not, particularly in New York, I was part of like the media world in New York. Nobody was talking about psychedelics or taking them seriously. And essentially in the, I guess in the late 90s, I guess starting when I was like 28 or so, I started to have like an existential crisis, like a sort of
mm,
nihilistic crisis of meaninglessness. Because I'd grown up as a skeptic, scientific materialist, atheist. So I assumed that, when we died, that was the end of everything, just total annihilation. And I felt that this was making me and everybody else around me very cynical and kind of like hopeless and detached in a way. And I was lucky because my mother had been part of like this group of artists and writers called the Beat Generation in the 50s.
mm,
I'd grown up with Allen Ginsberg. She'd gone out with Jack Kerouac when she was very young, who wrote On the Road. And they were all kind of mystics who really prioritized direct experience. Like they felt that you really had to, have experiences for yourself and not just read about them. So, yeah, I guess, when I was like 28, Saturn Return or whatever, I kind of, began to think about what I could do to find my own kind of ontology, I guess, in a way. And, I realized that probably the materialist worldview was correct, but I didn't know for a fact. It was just something that I'd received that everybody around me believed. And I remembered my psychedelic experiences in college. I went to Wesleyan for a few years, had really stuck with me as kind of openings that suggested there were other forms of consciousness
mm,
and or other dimensions or something. So I decided, since I was a journalist, I was writing for the New York Times and Rolling Stone and Wired and all those magazines, that I would then focus on that. So I started to get assignments. I wrote for Village Voice. I did an ayahuasca journey in New York. They were still very, very rare. There really wasn't much happening. Then I got an assignment from a hip hop magazine to go to Gabon in Africa and go through a initiation experience taking iboga, or also known as ibogaine in the West, which is kind of the West African psychedelic. Now it's being studied a lot, and used for addiction treatments and so on. So that was a very powerful experience that became the start of my book. I think once I had that experience, I knew that there was a book there that I wanted to write after kind of realizing that, the sort of modern world was kind of repressing the psychedelic experience, the visionary experience, and it was so important to all these indigenous cultures and was so important to you personally, subjectively, when you had these experiences. So yeah, so that's what led me to write Breaking Open the Head. And yeah, because I had some chops as a journalist, I was able to get assignments. I was able to go to, Africa and then Ecuador. Then I also visited the Mazatecs in Mexico. Later, I got an assignment to visit the Burning Man Festival, I think in like 2001 or something, when it wasn't such a big deal, or
mm.
wasn't such a well-known thing. And those became some of the experiences that were, written about in that book.
Mm-mm. I don't know what you think now. From what I've heard of Burning Man, I've never been. I've heard it sort of started off as quite a beautiful thing, and it's sort of turned into a commercialized Silicon Valley hub, and it's not quite what it used to be. Do you still go?
I have not gone for about 5 or 6 years. I'm considering going back this year. Um, yeah, I mean, Burning Man was always very complicated. I mean, there were always there was a lot of the tech elite there, and then it became more of a cultural phenomenon. It started to attract a lot of European and American kind of trust fund people and old money and so on, and it sort of became like a playground for the super wealthy in a way. So you would have other people there too, but in the same way people might buy yachts to sail around Ibiza or rent them
Mm,
or whatever. People would spend drop $1 million on an art car or like some huge, sculpture in a camp to show how cool they were.
mm,
And yeah, it just began to feel that it went from, this idea there was like this, Larry Harvey, the founder, had that it was like this blank canvas and really about spontaneous creativity and, everybody's an artist and so on, to being more of a particular culture that had its own conscripted reality where people would, you know, study on how to dress and then wear exactly those clothing and be told who was the right DJ to see at the right 2 a.m. or 5 a.m. at the where to go and so on. So I just felt it became more of a culture of conscription,
mm,
and in some ways like a networking event for like the power elite. But yeah, I mean, it's still very beautiful, and it's spawned all these festivals all over the world. Like in Europe, you have like Nowhere, you have Borderlands, and so on. So it's still been a very generative movement, and I
mm,
think important in that it really reveals how kind of social codes and culture are very malleable, and if people are given a different set of codes on how to behave if it benefits them. So, for instance, like it's a gift economy, you don't spend money, leave no trace, everyone's a participant. As people correspond, to that culture, it can be a very transformative experience. I think people's minds still get blown when they go the first couple times.
mm, mm. Yeah, I've got some friends in Spain. I didn't know that it was a thing, but they've got what they call, I think they call them pre-burns around Europe. Do you know about these? Where it's like the month before Burning Man, they actually do a mini Burning Man isolated. It's usually in sort of desert countries, so Spain's quite popular for it. They do these pre-burns because people are so hyped. It's almost like a pre-drink before you actually head out to, was it Nevada they do Burning Man?
Nevada, yeah, I didn't know about the pre-burns, but I know about there are lots of festivals that basically apply the Burning Man 10 principles. Like Nowhere is one of them, or Borderland, which I think is in Sweden. Yeah, there's like an Israel version. There's
Mm.
versions across the U.S. And those run on their own like annual schedules.
Mm, mm, okay. So cycling back to you and your journey, I'm wondering, why didn't you just become a hippie afterwards and just sort of roam around, staying in these countries? Surely there must have been something in your mind at one point that said, I just kind of want to stay here with these people in Gabon or South America and just do this for the rest of my life. Why come back and write about it?
I mean, I never had that feeling. I define myself more as a intellectual artist, philosopher. I was really more just interested in kind of learning for myself and then sharing what seemed most important. And after I wrote the first book, I discovered that a lot of these cultures had a prophetic understanding of the time that we're in. And then I was reading like Terence McKenna, who talked about time wave zero, the eschaton, and connected that to the Mayan calendar, and Jose Arguelles, who was another visionary psychedelic kind of author philosopher who kind of believed that the Mayan calendar was a very profound tool for understanding the nature of like transformation of consciousness and civilization.
Mm,
So then I wrote a second book about prophecies called 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl.
mhm,
Probably after that book, I should have taken a break and a rest. But at that point, this was like 2007. I was very concerned that these prophecies were probably, true in some way or other, and that maybe there wasn't that much time before, some kind of transformational or catastrophic event. I
mm,
was concerned also even then about the rising authoritarianism in the U.S. So then I tried to build like a sort of company and a nonprofit, a media company, where we were organizing local groups. So I did that for a number of years.
Sure, sure. From what I understand of Time Wave Zero, which is Terence McKenna's original idea, right? It's the idea that time sort of comes in waves and you get peak moments of novelty. And you can sort of see that and you can chart that throughout time, if I'm led to understand that right.
Yeah, well, he thought that history was a model of the ingression of novelty into
Mm,
time, and that it was reaching it was like accelerating, and it was reaching kind of like a culmination where we would, become like multidimensional or, create some like ultimate tool. I mean, I think in a way, like what's happening with artificial intelligence and kind of the technological acceleration that's happening, I mean, could be connected to what McKenna was sort of thinking about. I mean, he popularized this idea of the singularity that I think other writers also talked about. Ray Kurzweil then wrote about the singularity is near. A lot of these tech elites are kind of operating under this idea that we're moving towards this kind of rupture where technology and humanity kind of merge. Um,
mm,
and McKenna was a little bit ambiguous in his writing, whether this was like a psychic event or technological event or some of both. Jose Arguelles believed that, I think he was premature, but he thought that post 2012, he actually died in 2011, we would be living in a post technological civilization. That we would
mm,
sort of realize that a lot of the technology was not really to our benefit, and we would take away a lot of it, but we would also develop new like telepathic and psychic abilities and
mm.
live in like small garden communities. So that hasn't happened yet, but another interesting vision.
Sure, sure. So when you were writing your second book, 2012, I never know how to pronounce that name. Quetzalcoatl? Am I saying that right?
Sounds good. Sounds great. I'm not a
It's
great
good enough.
pronouncer either. Yeah.
Yeah. How did that compare with what you're seeing now? Do you think that prediction was right initially with AI, and how do you see that? How do you see that playing out? Because I know people talk about it going one way or the other. As either we're going to live in some beautiful utopia, or we're going to devolve into some horrible dystopia governed by elites with all the power, robotic future. What do you think about like transhumanism? Sort of, you're talking about like the singularity and where we're going with that.
Well, I mean, I don't know where we're going exactly. I'm very concerned that we are, you know, sort of tilting towards a technological dystopia
Mm,
because the surveillance powers of technology and the manipulation powers of AI are so immense. And I think we're definitely seeing like, the US is like a massive psyop over the last 20 years. And, with the sort of integration of the technology companies into a sort of neo-fascist authoritarian government, it's very scary for human freedom in the future. And
mm,
yeah, I mean, it's a deep concern for me. I mean, I wrote a third book, How Soon Is Now, where I sought to kind of assemble an alternative model for the future, where we could use these technologies as tools of liberation, instruments of liberation. I mean, AI has a lot of drawbacks, but it's also like an unbelievably amazing learning tool. Like basically
mm,
anything that anybody wants to learn now, they have like a PhD research assistant at their side. If you want to learn, like I mean, I've been learning, you know, Premiere, editing software and other softwares, and I can, I never would have been able to do it, without a physical human teacher. And now you
mm,
just send it a screenshot when you hit a brick wall, and it helps you navigate. That can be used for languages. You can converse with the AI in different languages. You can, learn, research history. You can upload, 50 books to a Notebook LLM and then talk to the books and
mm.
extract the wisdom from them. I mean, so yeah, I mean, if you go to my YouTube channel, which is I think Liminal News, or Liminal, yeah, Liminal, I don't know. If you look at my name on YouTube, I just did a short AI video based on the philosopher Bernard Stiegler, who
Mm.
was a French philosopher. Maybe he was Belgian actually, but yeah, he basically saw that our society was. He called this the Anthropocene. That they were seeing like massive entropy in terms of how we're kind of simplifying the physical world, the biosphere, removing complexity, species, and so on, and also an entropy in the level of the human psyche as we eliminate like local cultures and kind of homogenize the collective mind, and then with these media tools they can manipulate people into false beliefs and so on. But he also saw that there was a possible for what he talked about as a negentropic future where we kind of use these tools and these technologies to reverse the entropic processes that we had unleashed. So I think
Mm.
that's our only hope at this point. I mean, there are people like Paul Kingsnorth who wrote a book called Against the Machine, who are talking about dismantling or just abandoning the technologies. I really don't think that's going to do the job for us. I think we have to kind of engage with these things and humanize them, and use them for. I mean, AI. We could use AI to create participatory democratic governance structures where, or sharing systems where it figures out what everybody has and what they need, and then create like markets to where you can share stuff outside of the monetary system. Now with like vibe coding. So I think that like you know there's tremendous potential for a positive transformation in human civilization right now. The problem, of course, is that the resources and the wealth are largely in the hands of people who really want to maintain control over the people. And as we've just learned from the Epstein files, it's reinforced perhaps the sense that a lot of the people who are at the top of the power pyramid are kind of have mental disorders, psychopathic disorders, sociopathic disorders, and to amass that level of wealth and power in a competitive, capitalist, military-industrial civilization, basically requires you to not have empathy or conscience. So those are the people who kind of succeed up the sort of pyramid. So that's it's like a massive civilizational challenge, and at this point, I don't see how we resolve it. But there have been other challenges in the past, and then there was a breakthrough. So. Sorry, I'm talking so much, by the way.
No, absolutely fine. That's what we're here for. Here to You're here to speak. It's the one thing people always talk about on a podcast is they apologize for talking so much, and it's like that's literally what we are here to do. No,
No, I know,
no
but like
apology
you're asking like
necessary.
a question. I'm talking for like 20 minutes or whatever. But anyway, yeah.
No,
So
no, 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 no. I love it. I love it.
yeah, yeah.
Um, do you think there's any place for? Are you familiar with Andrew Gallimore's work on DMT?
Yeah, I love
Do you
Andrew. I
think
did
there's any?
some research things with him too.
All right, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any place for psychedelics helping people through this next phase? Do you think it's something that you found useful for your own journey to understand and sort of change your outlook on the world to get to where you are now? And obviously, there's a few people who shouldn't take psychedelic drugs, but for the most part, do you think it's something that could help people? Is it something that we should be focusing on? What? And I'm curious, like, from your own experiences with, say, DMT and meeting other entities, what do you think is going on? Is it just something in the mind, or is it something that we should be paying more attention to as a wider community?
Well, now I realize that it's not my fault that I'm answering for these long answers because you're asking me these like long questions that
It's a
take forever
sentence,
to come
sorry.
back.
These multiple sentences,
Like,
yes.
and my thoughts on that are extremely complicated. One problem we generally have in this society is you know particularly now people are very reactive. They want simple, good, bad, yes, no answers. They want dualistic kind of answers, and
Mm,
some things are very very nuanced and complicated, and
mm,
in some cases we don't even know everything that's going on. I think with psychedelics that turns out to be one of those cases. So like when I wrote Breaking Open the Head, I was extremely enthusiastic about the value of psychedelic experiences for people. And in general, I would say that, most people I know have benefited from psychedelics. Yeah, quite a lot, really. However, I also feel that, as we've seen them being kind of like appropriated, let's say by the sort of, capitalist commodity culture, which both includes, corporations who want to use the substances for profit, and kind of mental health professionals who have, in a way, maybe a very limited idea of the psyche because they don't have a kind of a multidimensional, kind of animistic or shamanic approach to the nature of reality. I feel that we've drifted into hot water,
mm,
and but I mean, I no longer feel like I'm like the reigning expert on this stuff as I did maybe 10 years ago, just because I sort of got tired of thinking about it and turned to other things. Also, I personally felt that at first these things were of incredible benefit for me, and then it was maybe probably my fault, but over time I began to feel they had a less and less good impact, and actually began to have a negative impact on me. And I think I got a little bit crazy, and I got very impulsive, and certain areas of my own shadow, around like sexuality and relationships came more to the fore because I felt, psychedelics can give you this idea that, you're meant to, everything is meant to happen now, like revolution, revelation, enlightenment, blah, blah, blah. In reality, in the human condition, it takes a while to kind of convert, what Wilber talks about, Ken Wilber talked about is like traits into states, or sorry, states into traits. You can have
Right.
these state experiences, you can see what things should be or could be, but then, you still have all of your psychological baggage and your conditioning, your even your karmic conditioning perhaps. And therefore a lot gets in the way. And so, and then there's also, and then beyond that is this whole question that you brought up of entities and what are these entities? Are they, are they beneficial? Are they not beneficial? Are they dangerous? I mean, the indigenous shamanic cultures would say there's a whole range of, non-physical, interdimensional spirits, or however you want to phrase that, demons, spirits, angelic beings, guardians, malevolent beings, ambiguous beings, beings who don't give a fuck about us, beings who, want to see us evolve and so on. And the problem is, particularly coming from a modern Western kind of conditioning, we just don't have much grounding or much foundation or much legacy. So I think a lot of times we're going out there, we're getting lost, and now we're seeing like, once again, I think the tech elite, the sort of, who've become a lot of them are becoming MAGA or MAHA or libertarian in the US, they've all been going to Burning Man and taking ayahuasca and ketamine and so on. And instead of that leading to the sort of opening of the compassionate heart and wanting to see the world kind of like flourish and to see like raise up those who are suffering and so on. That you have people like Elon Musk, who seems to consume a lot of psychedelics, sort of saying we don't need empathy anymore, or empathy is overrated, and then actually enacting policies that are damaging or fatal to potentially millions of people, like dismantling U.S. aid, which may lead to 12 million deaths in the next few years of poor people in Sudan and so on. So. Yeah, I think we're sort of drifted into hot water. I mean, a thinker that I really appreciate and always go back to is Rudolf Steiner, who I wrote about in my books, and recently did a course at the Steiner Institute in New York. And his whole thing, and he was writing in the 1910s, like he was like 1865 till 1925, I think he lived. So he wasn't focusing on psychedelics in particular, but he felt that like attempts to sort of breach the realm of the psyche and enter into the spirit realms too quickly are inevitably can be very dangerous and destabilizing and can actually have negative impacts on people's development. And so he advocated for a much more patient method of, he created his own like meditation system, yeah. So I don't know. I sort of at this point feel that the amplification of psychedelic use may be contributing to the sense of our reality approaching more and more on the demonic in a strange way.
Yeah, I actually, there's one of the things I really, really wanted to ask you about, kind of stuck with me from your book, because a lot of people have heard of DMT, not a lot of people have heard of DPT. Your book is the only place I've ever really encountered that, and you're quite, I guess, demonic, if you would call it that, chapter. And I'm wondering if you could explain, just summarize for people who haven't read your work what that was. And I'm curious, a few years on now, how you see that encounter. Have you ever tried it
25?
again?
No,
Yeah,
no.
no, that's what I think. Yeah, can you explain for people what that was?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so dimethyltryptamine is a naturally occurring alkaloid that has like methyl group, I guess, and it's a lot of plants express it. Also, the bufo toad, where we get 5-MeO-DMT, has DMT in it. DPT, dipropyltryptamine, is another kind of like simple psychedelic, but it doesn't appear in nature. I think it might have been Shulgin who discovered it. I think there was actually like a weird kind of a cult church in the East Village in New York in like the 80s who used it as their sacrament.
Oh wow.
I don't know if you know Arrowhead, which is the Trip Report. Kind of,
No.
it's a nonprofit that people put their trip reports on there. There's many
Right.
reports with TPT, and yeah, a lot of them have a sort of occulty, weird, negative feeling to it. And yeah, I mean, I don't really want to talk about it in such depth. It's in the book. I mean, I did it with a friend, and we felt that these sort of like, that we'd sort of open the gates for certain types of kind of beings. Um, One of them stayed with me, and I had experiences that at the time I felt were like paranormal or psychic experiences. I still do feel that way. And it for me, it validated a lot of what these different esoteric traditions talk about. And anyway, yeah, it's I think it's a lot for a mainstream audience. But it's in the books. I mean, I wrote about it. I tried to explain.
Sure.
But yeah, it was you know a very powerful experience. As a number of my experiences were in that I wasn't like a believer in the occult.
Mm.
But then I had a direct experience of it, and that's just a different thing. Once you've had the
Yeah.
experience, you're changed by it.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are talking about today, sort of connecting the Epstein stuff, and there's all this stuff coming out about the potential that they were even eating babies on the island. And I'm curious if you see any connection to the demonic entities that you've encountered, and that people are talking about. I'm not Christian myself. I'm not religious myself, but people are talking about this genuine evil being in the world. And I don't know if you've felt any connection between that and what you've experienced before, or
Yeah, I mean, I think it's complicated. I did notice. I don't know if you know Conspirituality. It's a great American podcast that, from a very rational perspective, takes
right.
apart a lot of the New Age and kind of spiritual, kind of modern spirituality. And they were pointing
Mm,
out that
mm,
this kind of way that a lot of people are saying, or even Joe Rogan, are saying like, what these Epstein people were doing is demonic, has a danger of kind of just removing agency and making it feel
mm,
that it wasn't like adult men and powerful people with agency, like just being responsible for horrible actions.
mm, mm.
So that's a caveat. Having said that, yeah, I mean it. I don't know what we're ultimately going to learn. I don't know if they did eat children or whatever, but um, I find it possible that there are black magic practices that go back to ancient Babylon or something. And whether you've like studied those practices or whether you're just in that kind of field of behavior and power, they might become like innate attractors, where like
Mm.
you're kind of like the ritual of like proving that you're capable of doing this with your fellow conspirators is obviously would create a powerful bond. That's also the case with what they were doing with children, 13-year-old girls and so on. So yeah, I mean, when you look at Epstein's the temple that Epstein had built on the island, such a weird thing.
Mm.
It does feel like there was, consciously or not, there was a ritualistic kind of occult element to the whole thing.
Oh,
And to
right.
the
No,
point
I've
where I
not
even
looked at the pictures of the temple. I didn't even know there was one.
it's like this weird blue and white box that he had on the island.
Mm.
To the point where like oh wait, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, maybe even the weird revealing of the Epstein files is on some level part of the ritual. Like now they feel
Mm.
that they have such power
Mm.
that they can even tell everybody what they did on some level. And I said maybe not conscious, but unconsciously. Like it's just weird the way the files keep coming out, and I'm sure it seems like they're revealing way more than they meant to reveal.
Mm.
But even all of that is kind of a sideshow compared to war, weapon sales, intelligence agencies, what's happening in Palestine, possibly Epstein's relationship to 9/11. I mean, apparently all the files from 99 to 2002 are missing.
Mm.
So I think, yeah, it's quite a situation.
Yeah, I was speaking the other day with there's a brilliant journalist, Johnny Vedmore, in the UK. He was partners with Whitney Webb for the longest time, if you know Whitney
Of
Webb's
course.
work. And they worked on some stuff together, and he's deeper into the Epstein stuff than anyone I know. And we were speaking about that, and I was like, why are they coming out with it now? Because it sort of does feel like 2020. Oh, the Pentagon releases UFO files. Oh, look, there's UFOs. Stop paying attention to all this other stuff that we're doing over here. It does feel like the release was timely considering all the things that are happening in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of distraction. I mean, even the Epstein files may be kind of a distraction from what Palantir and Doge are doing in terms of building a sort of, the Israelification of the U.S., building like a total
Mm,
surveillance system, for citizens here.
okay, I'm curious to hear why when you came back and why when you came back after your psychedelic journey and you started. Sorry, what's the name of your news organization? Liminal.
Oh, the one I have now? Yeah, Liminal, yeah. It's
Liminal.
not
Oh,
really
it
a
wasn't
news
Liminal
organization.
before.
What's that?
It wasn't
Uh,
Liminal before.
no, I had a magazine, Reality Sandwich, and we had a company called Evolver way back when.
Oh, right. So, okay, sorry. I assumed that was Liminal. So then how did that lead into Liminal and sort of what you're doing now? Because you are talking about a lot of this stuff and like what the US is doing with the wars around the world. And I'm curious how you got into that sphere.
Um, well, Evolver and Reality Sandwich, I had a falling out with my business partner, so I left that back in it was like 10 years ago or more.
Mm,
And then I did a number of other things. Wrote a couple more books. I had a book about ayahuasca called When Plants Dream that I wrote with a friend. And yeah, I, my main interest is, this idea of, evolution of consciousness and so on. And so what's happening politically and technologically seem very crucial,
mm,
because for instance, it doesn't feel like back in 2010, 2012, I had a big sense of like there was going to be this like maybe positive transformation. Now, I don't know. It feels more like, regression. Like a lot of people seem to be regressing. And hopefully that's just a stage, and there's another
mm,
stage where people get their act again together. But I mean, like, I saw so many people that I know, yeah, fall into the trap of like RFK Jr. and Maha and the sort of anti-vax stuff, and even ended up like supporting Trump for a while and so on. And we're dealing with this very powerful technologies that seem to be having a lot of negative impact. So, for instance, a friend of mine wrote a book on cognitive capitalism, and we don't really think about, yeah, like basically what capitalism does is it's inherently unstable as a system because it's fueled by debt. So it constantly needs to find new things in the world and turn them into markets and profit centers. So we globalize the
sure.
whole world. So there isn't really much in the external world to turn into a new market. So then it became about colonizing the psyche and finding elements of our innate, cognitive capacities that could be turned into markets. So if you think about something like Google Maps or Apple Maps, like GPS, you know, that everybody used to just navigate for themselves, right, and figure it out. And maybe
Mm,
you have to stop somebody on the street and say, like, hey, I'm trying to get here. What do I do? It actually created
mm,
sort of interactions and so on. I also use GPS. I'm not trying to be a hypocrite here, but the problem is that, when you're a kid, your hippocampus is developing, which is what kind of like, is the center of spatial navigation and spatial memory. And memory in general is very connected to, spatial memory and navigation.
mm.
Like in the Renaissance, they used to have these things called memory palaces. Like if you wanted to remember like a whole
Right. Yeah.
thing, you
People
would
talk about it with
go.
like Sherlock and yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So our memory is very spatial, and the hippocampus develops apparently from the ages of like 8 or 10 to like 16 or 18 or something.
Mm,
And kids are kind of meant to, go into the forest together, get lost. So how do we get back? There's that rock, there's that stream, and you strengthen and you develop the hippocampus, um, um, so it's healthy. But if a kid has got a phone from the age of 9 and they never are learning how to navigate, and then they're 18, it may not be that the hippocampus ever really develops. So they've
mm,
permanently outsourced some of their cognitive capacity to the digital infrastructure, to Google and to Apple.
mm,
Then it means that Google and Apple could someday raise the price and charge you $10 or $20 a month or $100 a month for your, you know, ability to get around, you know. So this is kind of the nature of cognitive capitalism, is that it keeps taking things that are innately part of our psyche and kind of externalizing them. So then we have to buy them
Mm.
back. And that's really what AI is doing with our reasoning abilities, right? So now instead of like reasoning for yourself, you'll just, rely on AI. If you're like if a high school student is trying to figure out Shakespeare, they'll be like, oh, explain to me what's this about. And yeah, it's pretty extreme. Like I was watching like this eighth grade teacher saying that her kids now, like if you just try to give them simple reasoning
Mm.
tasks, like you tell them something, and then like it should be very obvious what the sequential logic is. They just really can't even do it. So
Mm. Mm.
so that kind of
I
stuff
know.
is
I know a
really.
lot of that. Yeah, I know a lot of people talk about the factors like COVID ended up lowering a lot of IQ scores for younger kids because they didn't grow up with the social aspect, and kids who are sort of like 5, 6, and 7 now don't have as much reasoning. So I imagine that's probably something to do with it as well. Is there something to be said? I'm curious if you could explain quickly for people your idea of you sort of briefly spoke about it there, but you're talking about this idea of like a unity of consciousness, something that we were leading towards, but you don't think that we're going towards that anymore, or you still think that might be happening?
Um, right. I'm not as enthusiastic about it as I once was. I hope it happens. I mean, yeah. I mean, certainly the opportunity is there. I mean, we
Mm.
see that. I mean, you have a global network like Facebook, which brings together like 2 billion people, or YouTube or whatever. Um, so the opportunity that we could work together as one kind of planetary tribe is closer than ever. But also the forces that are making that extremely difficult or impossible, that are sort of like pitting classes and groups against each other, amassing wealth while starving people of resources. That group has also become extremely powerful and has
Mm.
also, figured out even more sophisticated ways to manipulate people through media. And yeah, and in the U.S. we're seeing this massive kind of consolidation of media by the right. So Larry Ellison, who's one of Trump's allies, just bought American stake in TikTok. He just bought Paramount, which includes CBS. He's trying to buy CNN. Um, you know, we basically have, yeah, we've made perhaps a fatal mistake in allowing for such insane concentrations of wealth and power.
Mm. Do you not think there's something to be said for there's this idea that maybe we're moving together to one consciousness through things like AI and technology, and there's this this move now towards Apple goggles and virtual reality, and like obviously that could be
What
a
is virtual
horrible
reality?
part of it. Like Apple goggles and virtual reality, and this idea that we're slowly this sort of transhumanism thing that we're slowly moving towards. Could that not be another path to get towards the one world consciousness, or do you think that's maybe like a negative
I would
version of
probably,
that?
yeah, I would probably say no. I mean, I think
Mm.
I mean, I think ultimately um, we would want to use less technology but use it better. You know.
Mm. Mm.
So.
Mm. Mm. Great. Okay. Do you see any positive way that this might go, or is it sort of, as you say, all regressing?
Well, I mean, I mean, in the U.S. we're in big trouble right now, and I
Mm.
have said, already said, I saw positive ways that it could go.
Mm.
In terms of what's the actual method for getting it there, sometimes things have to get extremely bad, before there's a change. But
Mm.
that can also come too late. I mean, back in 1943, fascism, seemed like it was going to win everything, and then there was,
Mm.
but yeah, I mean, it's very worrisome, I think, right now. I mean, they're definitely trying to kind of regret. I don't know what it's like in England right now. In fact, I just got my English passport. My dad was English, so
Oh,
I've been.
great! Congrats. It's,
Yeah,
it's
thanks.
probably the worst time to get one, but congrats.
Yeah, but I mean, I need a, I may need a place to go if things get like
Sure.
too dangerous here. I mean, I read a lot of the books before the election about like a lot of these Christian white nationalists, really believe that people who don't share their ideology are not fully human,
Mm,
and would be completely fine with like putting them to camps or doing whatever.
mm,
They think that the U.S. needs like a Pinochet or Franco, who won't tolerate dissent, and and then we're seeing. I mean, I think in a way we're with I don't know how closely you're following what's happening in the U.S. But I think there was like this whole thing in Minneapolis with ICE, and how it really brought the people there together, and they developed
yes.
kind of like
Yeah.
swarm intelligence networks where they were singing at
Sure.
the ICE officers, rather than taunting them and so on. So
Mm,
yeah,
mm,
on the one hand, it's like there's always kind of a human history is a battle between those forces that want equality of some sort of emancipation and civil liberties, and those forces that are against all of that. And so we're now in a
mm,
new phase of that struggle, and the oppressors, let's say, are learning the new tactics. I mean, it's interesting. Like I was watching this guy Nick Freitas, who's like a far right Christian nationalist, and he's been
all
studying.
right.
They study all the leftist organizing books. They study how leftists organized society, and they apply those
Mm,
tools to the right. One problem is that the other side doesn't really have a clear strategic agenda, whereas the Christian nationalist right has a very, very clear idea of what it's trying to accomplish.
mm. So what sort of what ways do you mean leftists? What era are we talking? What are they? What tactics do they study and then apply?
I'm trying to remember the book. They study Antonio Gramsci. There's another one from the '70s that I can't remember the title right now. But they really study this stuff. Gramsci wrote about
Mm,
hegemony and so on. But they apply it. They then use those to apply it from their right wing perspective to control the
mm,
hegemony and so on.
mm.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Do you not think there's a I know sometimes bad things can come out of good things, and obviously good things can come out of bad things. And earlier we were speaking about, say, big pharma taking tribal ceremonial drugs and using them for their own purposes, and sort of, you were talking about Elon Musk's taking psychedelics and maybe not using them in the best way. But is
Yeah,
there the
by the way,
potential
I
that?
would say that Musk, when you watch him in the White House and so on, he looked completely
Mm,
possessed. I think that probably
mm,
he's an incredibly arrogant, person, and he probably
mm,
is like totally infested with, malicious entities. But he wouldn't even believe that that's possible. Sounds like the perfect opening for
mm.
those entities.
Sure. Well, is there not some good, like you were talking a little bit about people with PTSD, and I know there's all this stuff coming out now where they're using potentially like ibogaine and MDMA for certain therapies for PTSD and veterans and things like that. Is there not the potential that something good, maybe it's a gray area, and some good things can come out of the bad, even if we're not seeing them now?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, there can be all sorts of individual healing. It's great, but I think that that how can I say this? Our society is the Western society is very individualistic, and I
Mm,
don't know if you've ever looked at like the philosopher like Byung-Chul Han. He's like a South Korean philosopher. He lives in Germany.
right.
He wrote a book called Psychopolitics and so on. He talks about how like we're in this culture of like entrepreneurial self-optimization, where people have internalized kind of these ideas of capitalism to this great extent, and that everyone's supposed to be like perfectly optimized and always like exponentially evolving their capacity to
Mm,
make revenue and so on. It's all the bullshit you see on like YouTube and so on. So the problem is that psychedelics get used in this construct of like the individual healing journey, which is fine, but
mm,
it's not. If you look at indigenous cultures, like when they would send their young people through initiations, the idea was to strengthen the field of the collective, and to have those
mm,
individuals become, those young people, understand that their, role is to protect the community as a whole, and that's even beyond, when the importance of protecting yourself. So we don't have
mm.
that. So we have a situation where, yeah, if people use whatever comes their way to maximize, their self-interest, often.
Mm. Sure, sure. Could you speak a little bit to your work? Because I know you run, is it online workshops or in-person workshops where you talk about moving to one consciousness, and how do you see ways out of the current world situation? Is it moving back to local communities or?
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I mean, it's like I never was really pretending that that I knew what was going to happen. I certainly don't now, but
Mm.
I mean, among ideas that interest me would be there's actually a writer, Christopher Bach, who was an academic who did a huge number of high dose LSD sessions with his wife. Wrote a book called LSD and the Mind of the Universe,
Mm.
and over the course of these experiences, he beamed into a sort of vision of the near future where he saw a lot of destruction, a lot of death, a lot of suffering, but then kind of authentic local communities sprouting up and building kind of mycelial networks between them, and that then becoming the foundation for like a new planetary culture. So I mean, I love that. I could see something like that being true. It may just be that this more like destructive, imperialist, techno feudal situation has to just play itself out, and reach its sort of apotheosis and then sort of collapse on its own weight or something.
Sure, sure. So what do you think? It's a change in politics that needs to come our way, or is it something else entirely? Is it something more radical?
Um, yeah, I mean, so I mean, obviously, I've observed over time, being a bit older, like Occupy Wall Street and Extinction Rebellion and so on.
Mm.
I mean, I still felt like what I was trying to do with Evolver was a better kind of plan of action, which is like something where you're putting a model of like, this is how amazing the future could be.
Mm.
If people had, integrated, mind, body, and spirit, if there was like better nutrition, if society, local community groups were focused on helping people, reskill and work on regenerative practices. I mean, a lot of the experts in AI are saying that within 18 months, basically most or all of the white collar jobs are going to evaporate.
Mm.
So that's an incredibly disruptive possibility. But it could also be an opportunity, because a lot of those jobs, like if all the bureaucratic stuff could be done by, networks, digital computers, and so on, then in theory, people could be liberated to, work on replenishing, regenerating the local ecosystems,
Yeah.
or maybe be liberated from a lot of drudgery and a lot of stupid work to spend more time on, loving relationships and art and so on.
Yeah. I know you
Contemplating
talked a little
nature.
bit about like a post-money society. I'm
I
curious
really
if you
like.
see that playing out anywhere. Sorry.
Well, it's certainly not playing out anywhere right now because you need money everywhere. Money is like the universal condition. But
Mm.
I really like Oscar Wilde's essay, "The Soul of Man Under Socialism," where he kind of envisioned this post-capitalist future where the machines did all of the drudgery, and then people had the time to explore their unique essence.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I know there's some places like I know Scotland has got universal basic income, and I know a couple of countries like I know Belgium's experimenting with it a little bit. And I mean, we're gonna have to head there. How long did you say until how many white collar jobs are
Yeah,
gone?
I mean, according to really a lot of these people who are experts in AI, it's like a year away.
Mm. Mm.
I
I know.
mean,
I've seen all the self-driving cars and things like that. It's terrifying.
yeah, I mean, but I mean, but that's bad because those people also like Uber drivers need money and stuff like that, or delivery
Yeah.
people. But we're talking about like lawyers, software programmers, graphic designers, sound design. I mean, it's like basically Wall Street analysts. So all these people who
Mm.
spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on these educations, if those people are all out of work, I mean, that is a very fascinating moment because if they were
Mm.
to then recognize that they had kind of a solidarity with other working people or even like, the landless peasant movement in the South or something, that then maybe we could finally see like a positive social change. But I mean, when I
Mm.
look
Do
at
you think there's?
what's that?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I mean, when I look at what's happening in the US right now, I have a suspicion that it's not completely, random or accidental that Trump waltzed into power for a second time. I think there's probably some kind of deep state, military intelligence apparatus that has done, analyses of what's going to happen as climate change intensifies, as resources become short, and also as artificial intelligence evolves. And they're recognizing that a lot of people are not of use for them anymore. And so if you look at, we just gave $90 billion to ICE, making them like the ninth largest, military funded apparatus in the world. And they're building, 23 concentration camps around the US right now to house 80,000 people. We know that Alligator Alcatraz, the place in Florida, like 800 immigrants who were taken there are now just missing, And, a lot of these people have an openly Nazi ideology. We've seen Elon Musk and Steve Bannon make Nazi salutes and so on, So, yeah, I mean, I think that my fear about the U.S., unless there's a deeper level of like resistance or change or something, is that we could see something like a second, Holocaust here, like a genocide. Like I think a lot of these people actually have a lot of bloodlust, and they also don't think that most people have a future,
Sounds like you might be moving to England sometime soon.
Yeah, if it's any better. Bali might be nice.
Amazing. A little bit warmer.
Exactly.
Anyway, all right, amazing. Thank you so much. Where can people find your work?
I don't know if they're going to want to read your. Sure. I mean, I have a Substack, which is, I don't know, it's probably danielpinchbeck.substack.com. And I use Facebook a bunch, and I use YouTube more and more. And they can just look at my name at those places. Cool. And I don't want to end on such a drastically bad note. I mean, I'm very much a mystic, in my beliefs. I'm like, I combine. Well, there's this philosopher Bernardo Kastrup, who's an analytic idealist.
Right.
So, this idea that actually the foundation of reality is nothing material or physical. It's actually consciousness itself. And everything that's happening is kind of like a dream that's unfolding, within this field of consciousness. Like that's very much how I see it. So it feels like everything is like that. Like it feels there's a certain kind of inevitability, even if things getting so terrible in certain respects. They're still nice for me and probably for you too. Like we can go and have a nice, almond latte and sit at a cafe and like talk to people and have fun and so on. But so yeah, we'll just see what happens, But I'm despite my concerns about the near future, extremely grateful and appreciative for everything that life has brought, and I'm very curious to see where we go from here.
100%. Yeah, I say the same thing about England as you'll be moving here soon. There's a lot of horrible things that are happening, but I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I love it here. So there's a lot of good to look. I'm in London. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like unfortunately I'm now almost 60. Like if I was like 45, I would be all like gung ho, like okay, I have to move out of my country or whatever. But now I really like I've got my daughter here, and like, it's like I'm not feeling as like like zest like the zest of wanting to like just be a digital nomad or whatever. But whatever, if it happens, it happens.
Yeah, you've lived that life already. You've traveled around the world, so
I love traveling.
You've had that for a bit. And you can
What's that?
No, I was just saying that you've already done it, but there's always time to do it again. Hopefully you don't have to, but
I suppose. Well, listen, it was great to chat with you, and I didn't mean to bring you down. I'm sure consciousness will unify in a beautiful efflorescence, and my negative ideas will be proven wrong. So how's that?
I hope to see you there. Yeah. Amazing. Cheers, Daniel. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.